Um, Hi and welcome to our Design Thinking Empowering Students to Reshape the Future Zoom webinar. I'm Marie Aspinall, Manager of Family Services at the library. Now you can all join me in welcoming Praja Tickoo, a new Canaan High School student and design thinking specialist. Praja has taken multiple courses in design thinking and has been featured in many news articles and podcasts. He's also the founder of Impact the Future, an organization aimed at teaching the process of design thinking to middle and high school students. Last year, along with SAS teacher Ms. Birdsall, they hosted a design thinking program and successfully encouraged students to explore and create a project using design thinking. Thank you for joining us this evening, Praja, and I will now turn it over to you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for that introduction. My name is Praja Tickoo, and I'm a 16-year-old student attending New Canaan High School. Today, I'm going to be speaking to you about how students can reshape the future. Let me just screen share. All right. So 2 years ago, I came across a quote by Sir Ken Robinson that I thought really encapsulated the problem with traditional schooling. He stated that if you're not prepared to be wrong, you'll never come up with anything original. Can you imagine how students feel trying to thrive in a system that rarely allows mistakes? It's frightening. Sir Ken Robinson believed that the school system killed creativity and didn't allow students to grow as natural learners. By fostering mentality that failure is not an option, many schools today actively discourage creative endeavors that students try to explore. The primary focus of school today remains on core subjects such as mathematics, science, history, language, and test taking like APs, SATs, or ACTs. Students rarely have the opportunity to explore and exercise skills of critical thinking, problem solving, or creativity. Since the system is reliant on students abiding to a given curriculum with a continued pressure to maintain high grades, they fear the risk of exploring creative approaches to assignments and trying new things. While this is occurring in our education system, there's a simultaneous event that is contributing to a much more serious problem worldwide. In today's world, the workplace is constantly changing at a rapid rate, leading to many subjects being taught in school today deemed useless for the future. By one popular estimate, 65% of children entering primary school today will ultimately end up working in completely new job types that don't yet exist. As a student, this is horrifying. After all the hard work and dedication I put into my work, my future is still unclear. Since we do not know what type of information or experience is required for the future, all we should be focused on is teaching students how to think rather than what to think. So now we have a system in which students aren't learning the soft skills needed to adapt, paired with a rapidly changing workplace in a time where we're relying on them to solve world problems. The real question is, how do we build students' confidence and skills to become future ready and have a mindset to solve the problems of the future? The answer is design thinking. Design thinking is a 5-step, human-centric, non-linear approach to problem solving. I know what I just said sounds a little bit daunting, but it's really a simple way of problem solving. The process relies on working with those affected by the problem to come up with a solution that meets their needs instead of building a solution and simply hoping that people will come. I believe that one of the best ways to exemplify the effects of design thinking is through an example. So one example is the Good Kitchen case study. This is a design thinking case study that began in Denmark, where there are over 125,000 senior citizens that rely on the assisted living system. One component of this is that they have their meals cooked and delivered to them by the government. The government noticed that among these senior citizens, over 60% of them had poor nutrition, with over 20% of them malnourished. This was a major problem since the government was responsible for the health and well-being of their citizens. In order to address this problem, they hired a Danish innovation firm called Hatch and Bloom to figure out how to improve the nutrition of their elderly population. They basically asked the firm to do one thing, which was fix the menu for the senior citizens. Rather than immediately jumping to a solution, the firm used the process of design thinking to address the problem. They began by observing and empathizing with all involved in the process. They interviewed the kitchen workers, followed transportation vehicles, and ate with senior residents to discover the root of the problem. They found out that the kitchen workers who cooked the food were demoralized and unmotivated, and that there was a large disconnect between the seniors and the food service that the government had originally anticipated. After collecting their thoughts, they developed and defined a new problem statement. They found that the seniors were embarrassed that they needed government assistance, unhappy with the food choices, and hated eating alone because it reminded them that they were alone. They also found that the kitchen workers were tired of cooking the same meals over and over again. Rather than assuming the problem, which was they needed to fix the menu, they discovered that the source of malnutrition was actually their emotions, the seniors' emotions and the kitchen workers' emotions. This led them to the ideate phase. Here, they worked with both the seniors and kitchen staff to brainstorm solutions to the problem at hand. This allowed them to have several ideas to prototypes such as new uniform ideas, improved meal plans, or revised color palettes. The objective was to appeal to the emotions of the stakeholders and make both the seniors and kitchen staff feel excited about the process. They then discovered which designs resonated most with the seniors. They also opened new communication channels between the seniors and the kitchen staff in order to make them both feel more comfortable with the process. Overall, this led to happier seniors and a more motivated kitchen staff, and the number of meals served increasing by over 500%. I believe that this is a good example of how design thinking works, because rather than focusing on the symptom, which would have been fixing the menu, which the government said was the menu, they evaluated the true root of the problem by working with those affected in order to develop a real solution. This process has also been revolutionary in the corporate world, not only by the government, but also at companies such as IBM, Airbnb, Intuit, and Intuit to basically transform their business. In the corporate world, failing early means that you don't have to invest too much time and energy into a solution that is ineffective, and you can save your resources till you discover the true problem. This is why design thinking has had great success with large firms and businesses. But in the education system today, failure is often demonized, and students don't get the opportunity to explore various types of solutions because they have to get it right on the first try. Now I want to tell you a little bit about my journey with the process. I first discovered design thinking 4 years ago, and I became very interested in the possibilities and applications of the process. In school, I was excelling in the workload and curriculum, but I wanted to find a creative outlet where I could explore concepts and ideas that I would have never been able to in the curriculum. I started to educate myself in the field and took every opportunity I could to learn more about the process. I completed courses at IDEO, the University of Pennsylvania, and Brown, which eventually led me to a 1-week summer program at a college campus in Boston, which aimed to take students through the design thinking process in order to help someone with a disability. So at the age of 13, I enrolled in this summer program, and we worked with a woman with a disability of multiple sclerosis named Annika. Annika's problem was that due to her condition, she needed to wear an ankle brace, and there were no ankle braces she felt comfortable wearing. Since Annika was very petite, all the braces that were her size were designed for children, with those designs being Scooby-Doo or Cinderella that made her feel uncomfortable walking in public. Annika was also very active. As she lived in a city, she told us she would walk everywhere she went, and she tried to maintain a healthy lifestyle. This was difficult for her because in order to walk, she needed to wear an extremely visible ankle brace. After being introduced to my team of 5 teens, we began to discuss and design ways that we could help Annika through the design thinking process. In the picture above, the 5 team members are shown with me on the left and Annika on the photo at the very right. Over the course of a week, we worked through the design thinking process in order to develop a new brace that was colored black and focused on optimizing comfort, mobility, and compression. We began by brainstorming potential options for Annika, taking the dimensions of her feet, creating sketches on the blackboard, and meeting with local medical experts. We then transitioned into prototyping, creating models based on low-fidelity materials we had found and testing them with Annika. Finally, we created a highly refined brace that met her needs. This experience was transformative to me. For the first time in my life, I, as a student, felt that I could help change someone else's life and have an impact on the world around me. I was no longer just another student who was focused on their grades in school, but now I was actually a student leader who helped design a brace for a patient with MS. The design thinking process empowered me to have an impact on others and gave me the confidence to create change. So 10 months after the end of the program, it kind of catches up to the present, and COVID-19 began. Before I knew what was happening, schools were being closed, stores were being raided, and people were dying. During this time, it was especially difficult for my family as my father was a frontline worker who I watched risk his life every day to continue to save others. In fact, the entire adult community was mobilizing to address a truly global issue. We saw doctors and nurses coming out of retirement, risking their lives to save others, people who went to work every day just to maintain the infrastructure of our nation, and millions of more who donated supplies to those in need. There was no denying that this was a time where the world was coming together. Yet the students were locked up in their rooms and focusing on e-learning. We weren't blind to the facts, and almost every student I knew feared for their lives. We would see reports that told us there were 178 million cases of COVID-19 or 3.86 million deaths. And as a student community, we felt helpless. There was nothing we could do to help. That's when I remembered the process of design thinking. I remembered that feeling of empowerment and confidence that I had gained at the summer program, and I knew the power it could give other students during this time. I began a mission to empower students, build their confidence to take action, allow them to have an impact on the world around them. I began by creating a curriculum. With the many courses I had taken, I felt that I could create a program that would reflect what I had learned through the lens of a student. I worked throughout the summer to finish a prototype of a course that included templates, workshops, and a presentation to take any group of students through the process. My mission became to empower students of today to solve the problems of tomorrow. I then reached out to my high school and started a club to gather a group of students and select one problem that we observed in our community to identify and solve. The SACS STEM teacher, Ms. Birdsall, who some of you may know, was also interested and very supportive of the idea, and we began a club at the middle school as well. In this presentation, I want to share with you my experience with the middle school, SACS Middle School, as a case study into how the process can empower the youth in our community. So the middle school basically started with 10 to 12-year-olds, a dozen 10 to 12-year-olds, with more joining throughout the year. At our first meeting, we began to brainstorm problems that we had observed at a community level. Within minutes, the conversation had shifted completely to COVID-19. This was one of the first moments that I realized my feeling of helplessness was shared throughout the student community. Everyone felt that we had to do something about the global pandemic. One of the remarkable things about middle schoolers is that no idea is too big for them. They began suggesting ideas from creating a vaccine to the development of PPE. It was clear that they wanted to solve a problem related to COVID-19. One of the most important steps of design thinking is the empathy stage, which led us to speak to community members and other students to get a better understanding of what they were feeling and what their concerns were. We found that although many were aware of the masks were an important part of preventing the contraction of COVID-19, people were reusing masks frequently. They were often unaware that bacteria on reused masks could be introduced to your lungs, making you sick. We then moved on to define the problem further and clearly develop this problem we were trying to solve. This led us to the following question: how can we keep people safe from the bacteria buildup on masks during COVID-19, which allowed us to evaluate our goal and have a clear aim when coming up with solutions. Next, we began to ideate, which I believe is one of the most exciting steps. This involved coming up with new ideas and brainstorming potential solutions to the problem we had identified. We began by breaking up the problem into small groups and brainstorming ideas on Post-it notes. This was a lot of fun for us. There were no wrong answers for the students, and they came up with everything from new types of reusable masks to UV radiation to kill bacteria. But something interesting started to develop. As we were brainstorming and researching, we found that people were not necessarily reusing masks as often as we'd previously thought. They were in fact throwing away masks almost daily. In fact, at the height of the pandemic, we found that 3 million masks were being thrown away every minute. That is 129 billion masks every month, which is equal to 1,548 billion masks in the year of 2020. Imagine what that's doing to our environment. During the pandemic, as a community, we were so focused on keeping people safe that we ignored the environmental damage being inflicted on the world. This understanding meant that our previous goal of keeping people safe from the buildup of bacteria was no longer as relevant, as people were changing their masks daily. We decided to dig deeper to find the root of the problem, and this is how we were able to create an impact on our community. In order to move forward, we had to first move backwards. We began the process again by redefining the problem at hand. Our understanding shifted completely. The design thinking process showed us the real problem that affected the world rather than what our assumptions of the problem were. We came up with a new problem statement that better defined our understanding of the problem. Our new statement was, how can we reduce waste during COVID-19? We were excited because we realized that this was the problem that even most adults overlooked, using a traditional method of problem solving that we as a student community were able to uncover using the design thinking process. We then continued the process and moved into prototyping. This part of the process is supposed to be done with inexpensive materials, such as cardboard or construction paper. The point of prototyping is to design multiple types of a product and test specific ideas or features to gain feedback from users. This step shows you if your product is easy to understand, addresses the needs of the user, and how it might work. This step doesn't need to be a functioning prototype, but it should be something that can stimulate an experience for your user. We had to do this step virtually due to the pandemic and explored online modeling softwares to form 3D designs. This turned into a really fun experience for the students as they were able to create iterations of what we had discussed in class with no wrong answer. In the end, we combined multiple prototypes based on feedbacks given by students in our school community to develop a group prototype featured in the bottom right corner. We then transitioned into in-person meetings and created an in-person prototype. Our hard work and dedication to the process led us to a final prototype that we were able to successfully test and set up in the front of our school. So as you can see, the box has two components. The top box holds a UV lamp that activates when the lid is closed. The bottom box contains the masks or other small objects to be cleaned. When the box is sealed, the process begins, and the UV lamp is able to clean the surface of the object, killing all bacteria in under a minute. This allows many people to reuse their masks more than once, lowering the number of masks used by our community. Our last phase of the process was testing. We showed our idea to students, faculty, and parents and tested it out to see if it would work. This was a huge accomplishment for the students, as they saw something they worked so hard on having the potential to make a difference on the number of masks being used and reducing the waste in our town. So I have a short video that I would like to share with you all, made by some of the students at the SAS Middle School Club.
My name is Praja Tickoo, and I'm in 10th grade, and I started an organization this year called Impact the Future, which is aimed at providing students with opportunities to interact and impact their communities on a local and nationwide scale. So I first started learning design thinking 4 years ago, and I was really interested in bringing that to the education system. And one of the ways that I wanted to do that was by providing opportunities to students to solve local problems while also building their confidence that they could make a change. I initially started by reaching out to my STEM teacher about starting a design thinking club at our school, and she was really excited about it. So then we recruited a couple kids to join the club, and over the course of the year, more ended up joining. So we began with the mission to protect people by creating some sort of machine that would use UV radiation to kill germs on masks.
3 million masks are thrown away every single minute. This totals up to a total of 1.7 billion masks that were thrown away in the year of 2020. We plan to use this machine to help solve this problem and to make people think that disposable masks or medical masks can be reused.
It was a fun project to build. It's a simple idea, but for a big problem. So the way it works is there's a big box in here where we take our masks, medical ones. It doesn't have to be medical, but any other mask. Place inside. Up here in this box is a big UV lamp where what it does is UV radiation kills bacteria, and we're basically using that to just kill bacteria on the mask. It's simple, but it's pretty effective for a big problem.
The issue with throwing out all these masks is, as we know, a lot of our trash ends up in wildlife, and this has had significant impact on wildlife, just in general, just the overall planet.
So the design thinking process ultimately led us to our final solution with a goal of reducing waste. And this was something that really took time to come up with, because through a failing forward mindset, we were able to experiment with different types of prototypes, with different models that we wanted to try, and everyone is able to contribute till we sort of came down to a final solution that we were able to test with our prototypes and also implement at our school. So when I first learned about design thinking through a program that I completed, it really transformed the way that I saw myself in the world, and it really built up my confidence that I could make a change and that I wasn't just a child. Design thinking helped me see the world's problems in a new light, and rather than focusing on the negatives, I saw potential for me to tackle those problems. So moving forward, I would like to continue to work with my organization, Impact the Future, and continue to start design thinking clubs nationwide to empower students to create change. And design thinking really has the power to create change because it emphasizes failure and it emphasizes iteration. And these are things that with experimentation, students can build their confidence that they can really have an impact on the world.
Okay, so yeah, that was a really exciting process for me to see students in the community, especially at SAS Middle School and at the 5th grade level, have such a large impact on the world around them and be able to use design thinking to innovate and come up with really creative solutions. And it was so amazing to work with these students and see them grow and develop throughout the year. I'm also so excited to bring this program in partnership with New Canaan Library to our community this year. And something that we're going to be doing is running this program for students in the New Canaan community, whether that's SAS Middle School, St. Luke's, or other private schools, to be able to tackle a problem this year and use design thinking to solve it. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Praja, that was wonderful. Thank you so much. If anybody has any questions, you can send them into the Q&A. I know we had one who was just saying that you were a great presenter and it was well done. I know I'm really looking forward to starting this in November at the New Canaan Library. So if you've been watching this presentation and you have a middle school student, be on the lookout. We will be starting a program in November for design thinking for our middle school students to come and start. Oh, somebody asked how many people were enrolled in the program. So I think they meant the SAS program. The program currently hasn't started yet. We are planning to start it in November. So how many kids were at the SAS program, Praja?
Yeah, so that was what we did this year is I reached out to Ms. Birdsall, who was so amazing throughout the entire process, and having a teacher there was really, really helpful, or advisor even, because it was such a strong mentorship that she had with the students. And it was during like, I think second quarter of the middle school, and she had a group of students actively, and she asked them about this program. We didn't really advertise the program much or promote it. She just had a group of students who she thought might be interested. So we had about 12 students. And then as the quarters went on, she had more students cycling through her STEM class at the middle school, and more students started to join. But it was anywhere from about 12 to 15 students throughout the year. But this year, I think we're going to do a little bit more promotion of it and offer it to as many students as possible at the middle school, as well as at the New Canaan Library and high school.
Suzanne asked what you wanted to do for your profession, what you're looking to go into after you graduate.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. I think the answer to that would be definitely something to do with design thinking. I mean, that's what I really love. And the idea of like social impact and social entrepreneurship and trying to help students with that is something that I would like to consider.
Suzanne followed up and asked, have you found that design thinking affects other areas in your life? In other words, not just a project for school?
Yeah, so one of the things that I found really interesting is that a lot of design thinking courses today sort of emphasize that process that I showed, like that 5-step process. But design, like when you start thinking through the design thinking lens, it's actually more of a mindset than a process. So it's a mindset that you have to approach every problem in life. So it may not just be a question or a project in school, but any problem that you come across in your daily life, that design thinking mindset of you don't have to get it right on your first try, there are different ways to approach it, and not eliminating all the possible solutions at the start, that comes into play in every aspect of my life, I would say, because it's something that you're constantly thinking about. It's a mindset, not really a process.
We had another question about how does someone start learning about design thinking on their own? You mentioned the classes you took in the beginning, and if somebody was interested in starting to get to know more about design thinking and learning themselves, do you have any recommendations or what you were learning?
Yeah, so I think a key part of design thinking is actually very interesting. Most of the general content you'll get from taking any of these generic courses. The real part about learning that mindset that I was talking about is experiencing it. So I would say the most powerful courses are the ones where you actually get to solve a problem and see the applications of it. But to start off, I would suggest maybe a design thinking course on Coursera or just a design thinking YouTube video, anything that really explains those 5 steps well. And then it's all about just practicing it. So implementing it in your daily life, or trying to find a project that you might want to tackle and trying to use design thinking on that project.
There was another question about, do you think there are certain types of kids that are more or less interested in design thinking?
Yeah, I think one of the interesting parts of what I experienced this year is that every student had their own relationship with the course and as well as the process. But one part that definitely was very vivid to me or prominent to me was that the students would use their own background and experience. So say someone really liked coding or someone really liked reading or writing, to basically then apply that to design thinking, because there's so many components of this project, and having a team of students all applying their own interests, they all found kind of their space in the design thinking process and found a way to contribute. And that was really powerful for them too, because they were able to take something that they're passionate about on the side and really put that in a much larger scale, helping their community. And I found that design thinking allows students to really relate their own interests to a much larger problem that they're trying to solve.
I have a follow-up question from my own self. Did you find when you were working with the SAC students that some of them had more input or more ideas at a certain stage? Like at different stages, they were kind of expressing themselves more or less?
Yeah, I think one of the interesting parts, again, was this design thinking process that we went through. There's so many turns in the process and unexpected things, and different times we need different skills. And students naturally, when working together in a team, found the right time to step up. And I would say each student in the course at separate times really maybe participated more or less based on what they were good at. And I think that's one of the big advantages of having a team, especially of 5th graders who are so incredibly creative, hardworking, and especially motivated by this idea of helping those around them and being more like an adult.
I have Jacob asked if you could describe your experience at IDEO. Is that right?
Yeah, so I took an IDEO course when I was starting to get into design thinking, and I would say that course really showed me what, actually, I'll answer that in 2 parts. The first part is that it really showed me what the design thinking process was about. So they had given us a problem to solve rather than picking a problem we were passionate about. And we basically worked with groups of adults to come up with solutions to those problems. But I felt like the one part that was lacking was that we didn't actually get to implement those in the real world. And since it was online, it was a little bit more difficult to do that. But I think students have such a great potential to be creative and to really come up with amazing solutions that actually picking a problem that's meaningful to them and then implementing real world change is a really valuable experience.
We had another question about what would your message be to parents of kids in the community?
Yeah, so I think what I would say to parents is that it's really important to let your student or child explore their creative potential, because I think one thing that a lot of kids today fear is trying to approach some of these larger problems, and it can be very daunting. I think one of the things that allowed the kids in the middle school to do it this year was that they were working in a team and that there was some sort of process that they were able to go through. And also they had a year. There was no pressure. There was no grade at the end of the year where they said, okay, you're going to be evaluated on how well you came up with a solution. It was more of a creative endeavor that they were allowed to explore. And also there was nothing keeping them there. Like they were allowed to leave or join the club whenever they would like. But I think choosing a problem that was passionate to them and allowing them to explore their passions, especially through a creative approach, really allowed those kids and those students to excel. And that's what I would say to every parent, just allowing that your student to have that opportunity.
We had another question come in about what you do for fun besides design thinking. So what are your passions that you kind of bring to the table sometimes?
Well, that's a very interesting question. I think one of the things is, so I'm a high school junior at Canaan High School. So classes are pretty busy right now. But aside from that, I really like to play squash, and I also like to read. And I think those are two things that, aside from design thinking, which is sort of my creative outlet, are things that kind of sharpen that physical and mental skill. I think reading, especially, I know this is a library presentation, so it's going to seem a little bit staged, but reading is something that sharpens your mind a lot. And I think that a lot of just the ways that the ways that have contributed to my speaking or to my comprehension, reading is a major part of that. And I really think that books and reading are important.
I can get behind that. Okay, does anybody have any other questions for Praja? Otherwise, I think we might be done. It was a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much for coming, and everybody please be on the lookout for our November program, which we are going to have.
Yeah. And one last thing was, so our school is actually, the Canaan High School, the district of Canaan, is organizing basically a way to create a makerspace in the Canaan community. And they're looking for anyone with actually a design thinking or STEM experience. And I'm just going to pull up their form and link it in the description, if that's okay.
Yeah. You can send it in the chat.
Yeah. But yeah, it's just an amazing experience. And I'm so proud of our school system for trying to take this initiative, because it's something that's really important and meaningful to me. And it's great to see that our school system is also attentive and caring to this. As we go to such an excellent school system that we're really, really lucky to have that. And I think having that additional resources and like I said, like the makerspace is something that would be amazing.
Praja, there was somebody asking about contacting you. Do you have a contact to get in touch?
Oh yeah, let me just put this link in the chat. Yeah, so my contact, I'm on LinkedIn, so that's Praja Tickoo, but also my email is prajatickoo@gmail.com.
Okay, I think we've answered everything. Thank you so much for coming out and listening to this talk. And thank you, Praja, for coming and telling us all about design thinking. I look forward to working with you more in the future. And that's it.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to the school year.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.